When you're doing resistance bands, you got to slow it down. Mark McKillier with Live Anabolic, and today I'm going to show you guys how to build muscle with nothing more than just some resistance bands. Now guys, this has been in the news a lot lately, and partly because no matter when you're watching this could be 2022, we were shut down for COVID this summer. A lot of the gyms shut down around the United States, so people were scrambling trying to figure out how to work out at home, okay? And so much of the equipment got sold out, especially the dumbbells and barbells and benches, all right? But bands are really cheap and easy to make. They can crank these things out by the millions, all right? So everybody was still able to basically order some bands and get them shipped to them and be able to work out at home. But the question is, can you really build muscle with these things? Well, the answer is yes. I'm going to show you how. And not just, I'm not going to show you certain exercise. So this is not a workout video per se, and this is not even an exercise video. This is just about the concepts that you guys need to keep in mind when you're using resistance bands to build muscle, because there is really some caveats and some things that we need to do a little differently versus using dumbbells, barbells, and really expensive gym equipment. So the first point I'd like to make is that we can literally hit every single muscle in our body using nothing more than a single set of resistance bands, okay? Now, these things cost about $25. You can order them on Amazon. They typically show up your house within 1 to 2 days, which is just blows me away still. And we can really hit every muscle group. So there are exercises for your chest, your shoulders, your triceps, your biceps, your back, and your legs, and your core. So that's everything, guys. And the only caveat to building muscle with bands that I would say is a little more difficult to do is when we're hitting our legs. All right, so there's not as many exercises that we can do with bands when it comes to our lower body. But we still can work them, especially the mother of all leg exercises, the squat. So I'm not going to show you how to do that. That's in a different video, but you can use bands to add resistance to your body weights when you're doing a basic squat. But guys, there's so many cool exercises that you will be surprised and blown away when you start following a really good band workout program, because you're going to be sore as hell and you're going to be thinking, man, do I really need a gym membership after all? Okay. And the other thing is, guys, especially you road warriors out there that have to travel on a regular basis, these are so small and lightweight. You just dump them in your suitcase, you know, the airport, not going to worry about them. And then you can do these same workouts at a motel, hotel, wherever you are traveling around the world. You don't have an excuse to skip your workout programs when you're doing a band program. Okay, so one of the tricks to building muscle with resistance bands, and this may sound obvious, but it's actually more difficult to do with bands than it is to do with weights, you know, traditional weights, and that is knowing how to pick the correct resistance, all right? So these bands are all colored, all right? And each color represents a different resistance or weight, okay? So the question is, how do you know what color bands and what combinations of colors to use for a particular exercise to actually build muscle? All right, so that is a trick, guys, and there's a trial and error period, okay? So when you're first starting out with a new band workout program, it's going to be a little more time consuming, but this is the trick, guys, and it's not that hard. You need to print out your workout. All right, have a piece of paper with you when you're doing these exercises. And when you find the correct resistance that is challenging and difficult to do for the number of reps that your workout program tells you to do, you got to write it down. There's just no way to, I cannot remember the color combinations for all the different exercises, all right? So you write it down, and then next week when you're doing that same exercise again, you just look at your piece of paper and go, oh yeah, it's a green and a red band. All right, I've already done this. I don't have to go through that kind of trial and error method of figuring out what is too much or too light of a weight. So write it down, and then after a while, you'll start to kind of memorize the color combinations. But guys, if you don't do that, you're gonna waste so much time, okay? And then the other thing is, if you don't write it down, you're gonna waste a lot of time because you're gonna be picking too light of a resistance, all right? And you're just gonna be kind of going through the motions. So that is a big trick and a really simple step to figuring out how to build muscle when you're using bands. All right, now this is really critical, guys. I think form is more important when we're doing bands than when we're using more traditional equipment like dumbbells and barbells and gym equipment, you know. And that is because it's so easy to cheat with bands. So let me give you an example here. All right, I'm just gonna do some flies. All right, so if I'm standing too close to the door, there's almost no resistance at the beginning of the movement. So I can just kind of, all right, go through the motion here. And if I'm standing too far away, then it's holding my arms back, and it's kind of, I don't have very good control over it. So the mind-muscle connection that you've probably heard me talk about over and over in a lot of different videos is something I want you guys to really focus on when you're doing these exercises. And that means that if I'm doing these fly movements, all right, so this is a chest exercise, all right, I want you internally in your brain, I want you to feel like you're looking at your chest, all right? So I'm literally thinking about my chest muscles only contracting, and then of course, when I say form is part of mind muscle, when you're doing resistance bands, you gotta slow it down, all right? So really control the resistance throughout the entire range of motion, all right? And then I really like to squeeze at the bottom of the movement, all right? Really feel those muscles, and that's part of that mind-muscle connection. So if I was doing flies at the gym on a cable crossover machine, all right, it may look the same, but it's different because on that machine, you have the same resistance at the top of the movement as you do at the bottom of the movement because you're lifting a weight, and that weight doesn't change, all right? No matter how high or how low that weight is on the piece of equipment, it's the same amount of weight. Now, when you're using bands, as you stretch the band, it becomes more and more difficult to stretch the band each incremental inch. So the resistance is changing throughout the full range of motion. And that's why the mind-muscle thing comes into play far more with bands, and the form thing comes into play. Because at the top of the movement, and I don't care what movement, whether you're doing a bicep curl, a fly, a squat, a lateral raise, a row, it doesn't matter. At the beginning of the movement, it's always going to be a lot easier than at the top of the movement because the band has not stretched out, okay? So you're not going to have as much tension. So to get as most benefit out of it as possible, all right, that's where the form and that connection with your muscles comes into play. So really have a nice slow controlled movement and feel those muscles contract, and make sure you're focusing on the specific muscle group that exercise is targeting. And I want to continue along those same lines with the form and the mind-muscle connection. And to help with that, you need to understand the concept of pre-tension, all right? So that's not a term that we use with any other type of fitness equipment, okay? And that means we need to have some tension in the bands, okay, at the beginning of the movement. So if I'm doing flies, like the example before, if I'm standing too close to the door, or in this case, too close to the anchor. Because remember, your anchor doesn't have to be a door. Your anchor could be wrapped around a pole or something like that, okay? All right, so if I'm standing too close, all right, there's almost no resistance in these bands, all right? They haven't been stretched, all right, yet. So if I stand too close, then I don't get any resistance until the bottom third of the movement, all right? So this is the only place where I'm really feeling resistance. Back here is just real easy. So pre-tension means step away from the anchor, step away from the door, all right? And so I've created a lot of tension already, even at the top of the movement, way up here. Before I've even started my fly, I can feel those bands pulling back really hard, okay? So that makes it more similar to a gym exercise where we're lifting weights that are connected to a pulley system, okay? So pre-tension, all right, and then it's difficult throughout the full range of motion, all right? So guys, I don't care whether you're doing flies or you're doing bicep curls or lateral raises, all right? You need to make sure that at the bottom of the movement or the beginning of the movement, whatever it is, that you have plenty of tension already built into those bands. And that means you have to get further away from the anchor, or if you're using your feet as an anchor, all right, if you're standing on the bands, you need to shorten those bands up, all right, if there's not enough tension in them at the beginning of the movement. Now this next concept, intensity, really ties into the mind-muscle connection that I talked about earlier, but it's slightly different. And that is, guys, it's real easy to accidentally just kind of go through the motions when you're doing a band workout, okay? You might not pick enough resistance, you might not be using the correct form, you might not have enough pre-tension in those bands. So you're gonna have to use your intuition, all right? And you're gonna have to motivate yourself enough to ramp up the intensity level to get as much out of a band workout, all right? So that you can actually build the muscle that we could build with, say, dumbbells or barbells or gym equipment. So how do you get that intensity, guys? Turn off the phone, turn off the TV, all right? When you're doing your workout, that's it. You're doing your workout. You're not screwing around, all right, doing other stuff. You're not doing your laundry, all right? You have to find a way to push yourself hard enough to ramp that intensity up, because remember, the whole goal of building muscle, whether it's with bands, dumbbells, gym equipment, barbells, doesn't matter, body weight, the whole goal is to damage our muscle fibers. We're actually tearing our muscles down. We're creating millions of little tiny micro tears. And then what happens is, over the course of the next few days, when you're sleeping, when you're eating, your body repairs those cells, okay? And it slightly overcompensates. So every time you break it down, the body's pretty smart. It builds that muscle back just a tiny bit bigger and a tiny bit stronger than it was before you broke it down, all right? And you do that hundreds of times over the course of months and months, guess what? Your muscles get bigger and stronger. So you guys have to push yourselves hard enough to break those muscle fibers down. So if you're just going through the motions and you don't really feel a good pump, if you're not getting sore a little bit the next day, then that means you didn't put enough intensity into your workout to actually break the muscles down, all right? And that's the goal. So intensity is much easier to find and to accomplish when you're at the gym, okay? Because there's a weight. And if you don't push hard enough, right, that weight's just gonna sit there on your chest. You're forced into enough intensity to get that thing off your chest and back up on the rack. Plus, when you're at the gym, you have the added benefit of just kind of the excitement, the energy of all the people around you. And at least for me personally, finding the intensity at home is a lot more difficult because I feed off of other people. So guys, you're gonna have to motivate yourself to some degree when you're doing these resistance band exercises, unless you have a workout buddy that's gonna come over to the house with you. But you have to push yourselves. Otherwise, those muscle fibers are not gonna get broken down, and if they don't get broken down, they're not gonna grow back any bigger. All right, now occasionally, you're gonna run across an exercise or a muscle group that we're targeting that's just gonna need more volume, all right, to build muscle. And what I mean by more volume, I mean more reps, more sets, and potentially more workouts per week for that muscle group. So some people work out a muscle group twice a week, some people work out each muscle group only once per week. It kind of depends on whatever program you're following. But certain muscle groups are just more difficult to target with bands. And specifically speaking, I think legs. Legs are hard to find a lot of effective band exercises. So when you're doing legs, I think, okay, that you're gonna have to increase the overall volume to find the intensity that you could find much easier in, say, doing curls, all right? So that means you're gonna probably have to do more reps, a lot more sets, and if that doesn't accomplish the goal, you're gonna have to do it more times per week. So instead of just doing it once a week, you'll probably have to hit legs twice a week. Certain exercises, certain muscle groups are just so big and strong that you're not gonna have enough resistance potentially. And even if you use all the bands together. Now that's not typical, but every once in a while, especially you big, strong guys out there, are gonna run into an exercise where you're like, dude, I can, you know, I've got all those bands, every single color is hooked to the handles, and I can still do, you know, 20, 25 reps. It's not enough, okay? So you guys are gonna have to do more sets, and you're gonna have to do it more times per week to get that intensity, all right? Because without that, like I said, we're not breaking those muscle fibers down. All right, guys, so can you really build muscle, all right, with just bands? Hell yes, you can. Of course you can. But it's going to take more dedication, I think. It's going to take more focus. You're going to have to be more disciplined, okay? You're going to need better mind-muscle connection than you normally would with other types of equipment. But it can be done, guys. And I am living proof of that because I do band exercises all the time, especially when COVID shut all those gyms down for months and months and months. I was doing band workouts every single day here at my house. I even had buddies coming over here to work out with me because I had 3 sets of bands, and I even had a really cool setup in my garage where I was using multiple sets of bands at the same time. So guys, you can build muscle with bands. It's really straightforward, but you need to know some of the tricks. And guys, you ain't gonna get big and ripped overnight, okay? It's gonna take time. You gotta stick with it, which means you can never give up on yourself.